And to discuss this, I'm joined from Strasbourg by Julie Girling. She's a member of the European Parliament for South West England and Gibraltar. Julie supports a second Brexit referendum. In Cambridge, we have Graham Gudgin. He's a former special advisor to Northern Ireland's First Minister. And Mike Galsworthy joins us from London. Mike is the founder of Scientists for EU, a campaign to keep the UK in the European Union. Thank you for your time, all three of you, for joining us on the programme. Shall we start with the very essence of the debate? And let's take it as we are now, in the middle of November. Is Brexit good for Britain? Julie.
Well, it isn't good for Britain now, and it never was. I'm one of those people who I was never supporting Brexit right from the very beginning, but I guess when it first happened I thought, okay, maybe I'll just have to hold my nose, but very quickly I put that foolish thought aside and I've been campaigning against it ever since. So it certainly looks beginning to look worse and worse the closer we get.
Graham?
Well, I think the big reason for voting for Brexit is a matter of whether you want to be a future province of a United States of Europe or you want to be an independent, sovereign, democratic country. I very much want the latter, and therefore I support it. I rather agree with Julie in the short term. I think that there may be some disruption, and certainly the EU is trying to make it as hard as possible for the UK to actually leave. But I think we'll get over that period, and it'll be reasonably good for the UK economy in the long term. But I don't think the economics are the primary reason for voting Brexit.
And Mike, to you, the same question.
Yeah, I'm going to agree somewhat with both of the previous two, which is we are looking at a complete mess right now. I was for remaining. When the vote came in for leave, I thought, right, we have to make the most of this. I wrote plans for UK and EU science after Brexit. But I always maintain that the public have the right to say at the end of the day whether they like what's on offer. And it looks like none of the options now that are on offer are going to be acceptable to the public. So I'm all for that public vote, which has the right to ditch the whole thing entirely, because I think no Brexit options look good right now. On matters of economics, but also on matters of sovereignty and self-determination, it's all looking pretty disempowering.
OK, Graham, you mentioned sovereignty there, and for Leavers, the arguments were that the UK will indeed regain its sovereignty, that it would have greater control over immigration, and that it would be able to make trade deals that are more beneficial to the UK than those that are in place right now, with the country being part of the European Union. Are those still the same views of those who want to leave?
Yes, they are, and I think the trade deals are particularly important. And Theresa May's Chequers, as it's called, Chequers proposals to really keep the UK very close to or inside the EU's customs union will constrain the trade deals, and that's why Brexiteers tend not to like it.
But Liam Fox, the International Trade Secretary, has had absolutely no success so far. He said it would be one of the easiest things in the world to make new trade deals. Michael Gove, who was also a very, very influential leaver, he said the UK will hold all of the cards. Almost everything that these influential leavers said at the time of the referendum have not come true so far today, Graham.
No, I don't think that's correct. I mean, we haven't actually left yet, and we're not able to negotiate our own trade deals. But plenty of countries have indicated that they would like to have free trade agreements with us. Donald Trump, of course, has done that, but Japan, Australia, New Zealand, some of the African countries. No, I think that'll be fine as we go forward. But the first thing is we actually have to get out of the EU, and that's you know, as your other guests have said, that's proving a messy business.
Mike, you were nodding your head there when I was putting those points to Graham.
I'm always amused by the trade argument, bluntly, because currently we're sitting on the world's largest trade platform. The EU has got more global deals around the world than does the US, than does Australia, than does Canada, than does Switzerland. And basically we've got this massive trading platform with over 50 FTAs and a whole set of bilateral deals. As we come out of the EU customs union, we drop out of all of those. We can only copy-paste a few that we can roll over. And so to think that we can then put on our own trade deals faster than the EU and do better, stronger deals than the EU is like jumping off a bus, taking a big tumble, and then thinking that you can run faster than the bus and overtake it. Those who are trade experts who look at this repeatedly say that it is bad for our trading relationship to come out of the club and try and go solo. We're in a much more powerful trading position at the helm of this club, which has global reach. And this is one of these cliches that just gets repeated and repeated. And I think it's the last thing that some of these Brexiteers are holding on to. They think sovereignty is all about these trade deals. But the very first trade deal we'd actually go for is one with Donald Trump. And we know what the terms of that are. It's giving up our agricultural and manufacturing standards, maybe chemical standards, and also allowing healthcare companies to come into our NHS and take over. If the US doesn't get that, they don't want that trade deal. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at, that within the EU we strongly buffer against, but outside of the EU we are desperado.
Julie, I've got plenty of questions for you, but I just want to go back to Graham here, because Graham, now you're shaking your head as you listen to Mike, and he mentioned agriculture. Just one of the things that people in the UK are worried about is having to accept chlorinated chicken from the United States. That's only one example, but why are you shaking your head so much?
Well, Mike sounds like one of those people who finds a dark cloud behind every silver lining. Of course, if we negotiate with the US, we'll negotiate on our terms. If we can't reach an agreement, we won't. We won't get one. But tariffs are very low towards the US anyway. It's really not that important. And of course, we'll still have access to the European Union. The average tariff into the European Union is only 4%. For most engineering products, it's something like 2%. It's really almost an irrelevance. So we'll still have access. And we'll, in all probability, we'll have a free trade agreement. That's in everybody's interests. And actually, it's particularly in the interest of the Republic of Ireland. So I think that there'll be give on the Irish backstop at some point. People will want to trade with us. We're the fifth biggest economy in the world. We've got a large market. It's in everybody's interest to do these trade deals. So I think that pessimism just isn't warranted in this case at all. There may be some difficulties. There will be negotiations, of course, but it'll be fine for the obvious reason that everybody will gain.
Okay, we'll come back to the financial implications for the UK in just a moment, but let's look at the politics again. Julie, let's go back to March the 29th, 2017. Theresa May on that date triggered Article 50. That began the two-year process of exiting the European Union. Do you believe it was precipitous? Was she even ready to begin the negotiations when she triggered Article 50?
Well, clearly not. But then how could you be ready? You can't. It's a two-year process. That's quite a long time. How we've managed to get almost to the end of it and virtually get nowhere is utterly beyond me. It was clearly set up to fail, because if there's a good deal to be had, if there's an amicable negotiation to be had, we'd have it by now. The fact is that what the UK wants, which is exactly the same advantages of being in the EU but being outside of it, the EU is not prepared to give, because you've left the club, so you don't get those advantages. That's stalemate, and that's where we are. That was always going to be that. I mean, those of us who know anything about it said right from the beginning that's what's going to happen, and particularly the issue of Ireland. That is insoluble under the terms of this Article 52-year period. There isn't a deal to be done, which is why there isn't one on the table, because the two sides do not have a landing zone that they can approach equally. So someone's going to be in pain at the end of this, and I just don't understand why the government have not been honest about that right from the beginning. They're beginning to be honest now, but it's a bit late, isn't it?
Julie, how do you have so much hair left? I thought you'd torn most of it out. Your position in the Conservative Party has really suffered, hasn't it?
I don't have a lot of hair, actually.
Well, you've been at odds with your own party, and your position has suffered. What does it say about the ruling party of supposedly one of the greatest nations on earth, where democracy is the driving force and part of the beacon that is the United Kingdom to the rest of the world?
Well, one of the sad things about being a British politician abroad at the moment is that people just look at us in wonderment. And I'm constantly being told, I never believed the United Kingdom could be this crazy, because we've always looked at it as a beacon of stability, etc. And I've always felt that way about my party. You know, as a member of a political party, you never agree with everything 100%, but you usually can manage on the 80-20 rule. But I'm afraid Brexit broke my back, and there's no way I could agree with what my party were doing on Brexit, because I don't agree that we should be looking at something that we might sort of approximately be able to be in the same position as we are in the EU, outside the EU. I mean, we've gone from this huge sunlit uplands of everything's going to be marvellous to, well, we might just manage after a few years, maybe, to get somewhere back to where we were when we were part of the EU. That's just not good enough. It's appalling. And for a political party and a government to be saying, oh, we are about to inflict this self-harm on ourselves, is irresponsible. They should be out the door, and I believe they will be for a long time in the future. So the arguments coming through on trade, etc., are all now around, oh, well, maybe we can cobble something together that won't be that bad. I mean, the guy just said that, oh, well, looking forward to this great new deal with the US, but if it doesn't matter, it doesn't really matter. Oh, really? We're going through all this pain for a new deal? What if it doesn't work? It doesn't really matter. It'll be okay in a few years' time. Bloody hell. Sorry, I shouldn't swear on TV, but why? Why are we putting up with this? And why is the government putting up with this? And that's why I've fallen out with the party.
Okay, Graham, you're a former advisor to Northern Ireland's First Minister. Just explain briefly, for the benefit of our viewers, and briefly if you could, the issue with the Irish border. I'll just basically say that after Brexit, the Republic of Ireland in the south, ERA, is still going to be a member of the EU. Northern Ireland won't be a member of the EU. So what's the problem with the border?
Well, there shouldn't be much of a problem, but it will be a problem between the UK. It will be a border between the UK and the European Union. And therefore, if there are things like tariffs or differences in regulations, then normally one would have some border checks. Now, it's agreed on both sides of the border, both in Northern Ireland and in the Republic of Ireland, that this border is so complicated. There are something like 350 border crossings. There are probably more border crossings between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland than there are in the whole rest of the European Union. And it's a border that people cross daily, and farmers have land on both sides of the border, etc., etc. So the general agreement on both sides is that they don't want what's called a hard border, a border with any checks or controls. And there are various ways of doing that. And it's not of any great importance. Even for the Republic of Ireland, it's only 1% of their trade. For the UK, it's an infinitesimally small part of UK trade, small part of even Northern Ireland's trade goes across that border. So it's not a big issue. It can be solved. There's no question, by the way, of stopping individuals. It's agreed by both sides that individuals will be able to cross the border with no checks or stops. It's only a matter of recording trade. It can be done in lots of ways. But for various reasons, the Irish Republic and the EU want to make this as difficult as possible. And the European Union's proposals here amount to a sort of semi-annexation of Northern Ireland, which of course suits the Republic of Ireland's agenda to have a united Ireland. So deep politics get mixed up in this as well. But I'm sure that there will be a solution to it, and there will be a way out of it. But unfortunately, negotiations with the European Union always go till go to midnight on the very last day. That's how they seem to negotiate.
Okay.
For reasons I don't really understand.
Okay, but whatever issue we're talking about, including the Irish border issue, Julie, go on.
I'm just saying, he just gave an analysis there, but didn't mention the Good Friday Agreement, which is the essential issue here. That the reason this border is
no, it's not
sensitive beyond anything that is the rest of it is because of the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah, certainly former Prime Minister
And
John
because of the
Major.
history
John
of
Major
Northern
has said.
Ireland and the Irish Republic.
Yeah, John Major, former Prime Minister, has said exactly the same thing, because there's a concern that that part of the country may go back, of the two countries may go back to the time of the Troubles, when of course there was the issue of terrorism from both sides, from loyalists and also Republicans. That is a major issue as far as many people are concerned, possibly not Graham. Mike?
Yeah, could I chime in on something here, which is Ireland is a particular problem. In fact, it means that taking the UK out of the EU is harder than any other country. If you want to take out Luxembourg, or if you wanted to take out Croatia or Slovenia, it would be easier. The problem that we have with Ireland is that you've got the country of Ireland, and then you've got the United Kingdom, and they actually overlap on Northern Ireland. The citizens there are allowed to be Irish, or they're allowed to be British, or they're allowed to be both. That's the essence of the Good Friday Agreement. And then also Ireland has built its all-Ireland economy, a sort of single market there. And this complex border sort of weaves between it. Now, when we're all within the same standards, there are no problems. But as soon as you remove the UK from the EU so that the UK can diverge from Ireland, then that does cause problems at the border. Now, what you heard Mr. Gudgin say before is that there are solutions to this. There are technological solutions, but the EU is being awkward. Well, no, not at all. The EU and Ireland are saying, right, if you've got technical solutions, brilliant. If you've got them now, put them on paper now. If you don't, then we'll just say, stay in the single market and customs union until you can prove that they work. So that's the only challenge there. If you fully believe that these technical solutions work, say, A-OK, let's move forward, that's brilliant, and in 1 year's time, we will have a stretch of border on which we prove this technology, everyone will nod their heads, and then we'll go forward with the technology. And then the UK can move out of the single market and customs union.
Okay.
That's why it's called a backstop. It's a very straightforward process. And the fact that these Brexiteers are saying how easy it is to do, but we don't want to be held to this, shows that there's some disingenuous argumentation going on here.
Okay, now whatever issue we're discussing,
pure pragmatics.
whether it's the border issue there, whether it's trade, whether it's immigration, whatever it is, a lot of people are criticising Theresa May and her government for just not being up to speed with all the issues. And we're going to play a clip, and
Yes.
you will almost certainly have heard it because of your interests in this. But for the benefit of our viewers, this is the Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, talking about people being scared of supermarkets running out of food, of medicines not being available to people, and how the UK gets the goods into the country. And here's what he had to say just a few days ago.
I hadn't quite understood the full extent of this, but if you look at the UK and you look at how we trade in goods, we're particularly reliant on the Dover-Calais crossing. And that's one of the reasons why, and there's been a lot of controversy about this, but one of the reasons why we've wanted to make sure that we have a specific and very proximate relationship with the EU to ensure frictionless trade at the border, particularly for just-in-time manufacturing goods, whether it's pharmaceutical goods or perishable goods like food. I don't think it's a question so much of the risk of major shortages, but I think probably the average consumer might not be aware of the full extent to which the choice of goods that we have in the stores are dependent on one or two very specific trade routes.
Okay, I think we can probably imagine what Julie and Mike are going to say to this clip. So, Graham, this Conservative government is negotiating Brexit with a Brexit secretary who seems to only have just understood that the UK, that Britain, is an island. Is this going to lead to the collapse of Theresa May's government and her losing the top position in the country if there's a no deal?
Well, I think that's a misrepresentation of what Dominic Raab was saying there and what he believes. He's a very bright and capable man, and I think the negotiations have improved a great deal since he's been involved. Of course, we've known right from the beginning that Dover-Calais is a pinch point. A lot of our trade comes through. Most of our what's called ro-ro trade, roll-off, ferry trade comes through there. But it's very hard to imagine why that's such a big problem. Again, modern border technology used on most borders now with vehicle recognition cameras and all the rest of it should allow all the traffic through very, very quickly. Not obvious to me who exactly is going to stop the traffic. I mean, are the French going to be stopping their own exports? I'm sure nobody on the UK side is going to be stopping anybody. So. This sounds like, I mean, the whole issue of Dover-Calais and food shortages and so on sounds like fairly standard project fear. We had that during the referendum. Most of it, especially the projections coming from the Treasury, have been shown to be complete rubbish, and I think we'll find that again here.
Listen, I really honestly thought, and Mike can explain this better as a scientist, that it's also a question in terms of food. For example, meat coming in from the EU which the UK won't be a part of, having to be checked by a vet. And that would take a few days to do that check. Mike, just expand on that point, because I believe we're talking about kilometres and kilometres of lorries being backed up, having to be checked. Because if the UK opens its borders and says, look, because the goods are coming in from the EU, that would allow criminal elements around the rest of the continent to take advantage of that kind of open border. So if there are going to be checks when the UK leaves the EU, what problem is that going to create for trade along the south of the UK, connected with France and the Channel Tunnel and so on?
Okay, it worries me that you had Mr. Gudgin there saying that this is Project Fear. This is from the government itself and Brexiteers in government talking about the problems with this. These are their own plans when they are announcing that they are going to be stockpiling medicines. So it's absurd to me that kind of like, is the world against us? Is the world doing Project Fear? Even the Brexiteers on our side. This is pretty nutty thinking. We know that if you come outside a customs union and come outside a market and have different standards, you do, under World Trade Organization rules, have to provide fair checks on that. Fair checks from the countries all over the world to the same kind of standards. Also, if the EU said that they're going to do fair checks on their borders and that blocks up our exports going into the EU, then a lot of things that shuttle back and forth also then get blocked up, and that also provides us with tailbacks. Essentially, the fundamental problem here is that we have built our relationship with the EU, both in trade, but also science, also cross-border healthcare, also security, on a set of contracts. We do international business via contracts, and the notion that you can just rip all of those away suddenly and that you will still get deals and commerce and trade going without a contractual basis and ways to implement that is why we're looking at this whole set of chaos associated with the no deal. Again, you can say Project Fear if you like, but this is our own government with Brexiteers in cabinet, these Brexiteers announcing what they are preparing for a no deal circumstance.
Okay, listen, we know, Julie and Mike, you support second Brexit referendum, and we've actually run out of time. So, Julie, I'll allow you a one-word answer if you don't mind. Will Theresa May be Prime Minister this time next year? One word.
No.
Julie, Graham, Mike, thank you very much indeed for your time.
No.